God, a princess. Don't tell me I'm being granted connubial privileges.
I am Miriam Rosen. I'm the public prosecutor assigned to your case.
Lie down and prosecute.
I'm told you do not want an attorney. You wish to defend yourself.
Who is better qualified?
Someone who knows the law.
Which law? The Israeli law? Very simple. An eye for an eye. Exodus 21:24.
How can you plead not guilty when you already accept our proof?
You charge me with genocide, which is not correct. I killed criminals under the laws of Germany.
What was their crime?
Being Jewish.
You need a lawyer.
My dear lady, you need one more than I do, I assure you. I see you couldn't bribe the Americans, or at least you bribed the wrong ones. They want me back. An American citizen, kidnapped.
We won't give you that.
That will cost you at least 5 Phantom 4s. Am I worth it?
No. I would have shot you in New York and kept the Phantoms. But then, I am not an idealist.
Bravo. Then we can do business. I have a proposition for you.
Let's hear it.
Under the American law, I entered the United States illegally because I gave false information. I said I was Arthur Goldman, a Jew, and I wasn't. If I admit it, that invalidates my citizenship and gets you and the Americans off the hook.
What do you want in return?
Suspend your court procedure. Let me question your witnesses in turn, out of turn, anytime. Call me Colonel, and let me wear my uniform.
I will consult my superiors.
That's something I never did, you know. I'm no clerk like old Eichmann. I plotted my own plots. I had a ball.
You know, Dorf, you may have been the only Nazi in Germany. Certainly the only one that admits it.
In that department, you will have no legal problems with me, I assure you.
Oh, in my heart, Dorf, I don't consider you a legal problem. You're a sanitation problem. But I have my duty.
So did I, sweetheart. So did I. So how is my Rorschach dog?
I don't know. I'll examine it later.
Only a Jew could conceive of reading the human soul from ink blots.
How do you substantiate that, Colonel?
I don't have to. It's true.
That's exactly the response I had in my clinic from a man who claimed he was Moses.
You don't seem to understand the authority of folklore, Doc. If you repeat it often enough, it becomes the truth, and people act on it. Hunter and hunted, victor and victims, until it becomes the truth.
And law becomes law.
Humor. A shrink with humor. Churchill. That a name for a Jew?
That's my name.
Are you a relative?
Not unless the Duke of Marlborough was a Hebrew.
Possible. But affirmative only on Winston's mother, Jenny Jerome.
Possible. But then most of us do have Jewish ancestors. You, for instance. Even the Fuhrer.
Hey, I have a question. If you find me insane, you can't try me. You blow the whole thing. So what's the point of it?
You are clinically psychotic, then and now. We're going to try you anyway.
On what grounds?
You were a colonel in the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing units of the SS, were you not?
Sure.
You killed at their orders, freely obeying those orders out of moral conviction?
Absolutely.
And your conviction was that all Jews had to be exterminated for the good of society.
Right on.
You believe that?
Of course.
Why?
Well, it's obvious.
The degree of psychosis can be measured in the disparity between the patient's fantasies and the realities around him.
It won't work, Doc.
What won't work?
If I'm psychotic, then 80 million Germans were psychotic. Then half the Gentiles and all the Muslims and the black activists and the Protestant members in the yacht and golf clubs in the United States are psychotic. And even you won't say that.
No, I won't say it because I can't prove it medically, but I believe it.
Look, you have to get it through your head, Doc, to segregate you. restrict you, persecute you, and exterminate you. Remember, we called it the final solution. These were and are socially approved acts. And socially approved acts, particularly when they are committed by a whole nation, are not psychotic. You people just ain't popular, dog.
Sir?
Hey, what are you going to tell them now about me?
I'll say that given the time and the place and the mores of Germany in the 1940s, that your behavior was within normal limits.
You are a fool.
But I'm also going to say that the ability to adjust to a psychotic society is psychotic.
You know what? I think all you Hebrews are paranoid. And knowing what I know, having been where I have been, you should be.
Shalom, Miriam.
Shalom.
Mimi, sweetheart.
Here is your agreement.
Good.
Uniform, address by rank, cross-examination by me at will. I confess lying in U.S. citizenship application. Sounds kosher.
I want this published
Where?
everywhere. The New York Times, the Pravda, the Spiegel, Playboy magazine. Open covenants, openly arrived at. Incidentally, why am I not being recorded?
You are. Did your wife know that you were not Arthur Goldman?
Matilda? No. You see, Matilda was an American. All she knew was I was not poor and not impotent, and whatever else I was not did not interest her.
It didn't trouble her that she knew you to be Jewish.
No, it excited her. It made her feel like a free spirit, liberal, even a little daring. Her parents, they came from Rutherford, New Jersey, spoke to her as though she had been to the moon or lived with cannibals.
You never communicated to her in any way you were not Jewish.
Mimi, sweetheart. The first time I saw Matilda, she and I walked my long-legged wolfhounds down my great terraces and marble corridors. She had legs that began at her throat. When I opened my Sienese door, she stood so awed before my Pompeian frescoes that I could pick her up and hurl her unprotestingly on my Louis XIV's bed. I entered her immediately. It was scalding. My eyes bled. What? No foreplay, she said. She came 72 times that night and cried like an angel. We never did communicate, sweetheart. Forgive me. A moment of sentimentality.
Did you kill Arthur Goldman?
Goldman? I've dedicated my life to it.
This isn't the police court. You're not accused of individual homicide. Did you?
Well, it's hard to say. I did, in a sense, kill Arthur Goldman, but there was nothing personal.
Why did you take his name?
I was always farsighted. The Führer, God bless his soul, was never good with military maps. He kept misjudging distances.
Why Arthur Goldman?
All right, let me explain the logistics to you. We had a certain camp procedure. We governed the camp through capos. Straw bosses, finks, usually Poles, occasionally Jews. A Jew now, who was on the death list, could sometimes stay alive a week longer if he could bribe a capo.
What could he bribe him with in a camp?
Well, privilege to eat the scrapings from the SS garbage cans, sexual favors, a rat to eat.
All right, so he bribes the capo, then what?
Well, our bribing Jew now, let's say Schwartz, takes the name and the number of a healthy Jew who is not on the death list, let's say Arthur Goldman. And this Arthur Goldman is being executed under Schwartz's name and number. You follow?
Mm.
Now, when the Russians came through and killed all the German soldiers they could find...
They did that?
Yes, of course. You know, the Russians have a somewhat black and white view of things. When the Russians came, I avoided their machine pistols by taking the name of the last of a long line of Arthur Goldmans and tattooing his number on my forearm. I stuffed him into my uniform, so naturally they shot him. So you see, Your question is difficult to answer. Definitely. The man I killed was only Arthur Goldman 10 times removed. And the Russians pulled the trigger for me.
Why are you making it so easy for us?
I assure you, I'm not.
You really do need a lawyer.
You do not understand. I'm going to win this case.
You're going to die.
Of course. Of course! But before I do, those who hear me will feel such contempt for the easy, quivering victims of Colonel Dorff, and will have such guilt for what they feel that they say, end this. Black it out, send them all to the showers, so they stop pointing their fingers at me for being what I am, surviving and untested.
Who are these people who say all this, Colonel?
You Jews, with the dark side surfacing. You people want peace? The hell you do. You want war, as everyone else does. Otherwise you get neurotic and sleep with your mothers. Murder keeps a man fit, Mimi. Believe me, condemned and dead, I will be your hero, and you will love me, because I have done what all men feel most alive doing, killing. And in the end, you will hate my Jews, because they are victims, and admire me. Everyone loves a winner, sweetheart.
See you in court, Colonel.
You know, for public prosecutor, she got great tits. Hey, what's this, Your Honor? No, none of that, fellows. A deal is a deal. A swinging, free-form court by agreement.
The defendant is correct, Your Honor.
Within the limits of propriety, yes.
There were no limits set in the agreement.
I am setting them
By what right, Your Honor?
because I sit here. You of all people should understand that, Colonel.
Because I sit here. You know, that was a prejudicial remark.
I do not sit without prejudice. However, since I must determine your guilt or innocence on the basis of the evidence about to be presented in this court, it doesn't matter.
Your Honor, you seem to be an honest Jew. Now, for Christ's sake, what's this humidor?
That is a glass booth replacing the dock, bulletproof for your protection. Contains a loudspeaker, microphone, earphones. I control the switch should your testimony or response become irrelevant.
Very clever.
Lead the defendant into the booth.
Gee, Your Honor, we never had anything like that in the Third Reich. Would have saved us a lot of embarrassment at the Reichstag's fire trial. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I live?
Yes, thank you.
Not at all.
Mrs. Rosen?
As the prosecutor in this case for the State of Israel, I have been asked by my government to make a public statement concerning the extraordinary measures we took to obtain custody of Karl Adolf Dorff and the reasons behind this very expensive and time-consuming court procedure 30 years after the alleged crimes were committed. My statement is addressed to the non-Jewish world. Certainly, no Jew requires an explanation. So, our legal precedent if one were to be needed, is the Nuremberg trials. There, Germans were tried and executed by an allied court on the basis of crimes committed before the court or the body of law it quoted as precedent existed. So we have that precedent as precedent if the non-Jewish world demands it. In the canons of the Roman Catholic Church, there is repeated reference to the moral law, sometimes described in the canonical statutes as the law of God. It is held to be superior to human law and overrides it when called upon by the divinely inspired conscience of individual or corporate man. Israel is in effect a theocracy, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But the state was founded under the laws of God, that is to say, the moral law. That law. And Elohim, the Hebrew word for the name of God that must not be spoken, is the core of the survival of the Jewish people. It is in the service of that law and that name alone that Karl Adolf Dorf was arrested and brought here for trial.
May I say something, Your Honor?
If it is relevant.
It is relevant. Well, first, may I congratulate the lady on her presentation. Masterful, masterful. To bypass the niceties of international law, shaky at best, the Nuremberg trials, and put everything under the umbrella of the big Jew in the sky, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And safe.
That is, in fact, irrelevant, Colonel.
Well, then just one more comment, Your Honor. Relevant. The word is abducted, not arrested.
Madam Prosecutor?
One was not possible without the other, Your Honor. The moral law supersedes the laws of the governments of man.
Mimi, you would be perfectly at home in the Vatican. The only problem is the Pope has no phantom force to make it stick.
I suggest you call your first witness.
Mrs. Carlotta Levy.
I remind the witness that she and all subsequent witnesses are under oath.
Mrs. Levy, do you know the prisoner?
I knew Miss Lieutenant Dorf.
When and where was that?
In 1941 in the concentration camp at Mauthausen in Austria.
You saw him at his work.
Many times.
Will you describe it to us?
At the bottom of Mauthausen, there was a rock quarry. It was a kilometer almost straight up to the camp. Every morning, 100 of us would report barefoot to 2 other officers. They would supervise, or we would pile rocks on each other's backs. Then we would have to walk up to the camp. If you fell down, Dorf shot you on the spot. If you did not, each day they would pile more rocks until you did.
I remember you. You did great. Marvelous constitution.
How did you survive?
I was taken out of the quarry to become a prostitute for the SS. So they fed me.
A fate worse than death.
No fate is worse than death.
Well,
Is the witness's statement accurate?
perfectly.
What was done with the rocks?
Nothing. They were piled in heaps.
Then, what was the point of the operation?
Therein lies a tale, or rather several tales, although anyone who has been in the army, any army, would understand.
Please, enlighten us.
Well, you see, Judge, Mimi, to be assigned to the camps was a prize. It kept you out of combat. All military units have a TO, a table of organization. The bigger the task of the unit, the more enlisted personnel you get. And the more people you get, the more officers you need, and the faster your promotion.
I fail to see what that has to do with the prosecutor's question. What was the point of the operation?
I'm coming to it. Incidentally, the other two officers the lovely lady mentioned. Killewanger's got a job in Cairo, and Poser is drawing a pension in Hamburg. Why am I here and they are not?
Irrelevant, Colonel.
You couldn't get the press coverage out of them you got out of me, huh? I did go on to greater glory.
Answer the question, please.
Well, you see, sir, Judge, our unit was assigned to engage Jews in work useful to the war effort at minimum cost. When it cost more to work them than to kill them, we killed them. After all, we had 6 million to draw. Hey!
Fire! We'll kill you!
Guard! I assume this is triplex.
Order them.
Is this triplex?
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down, all of you. You're disgracing yourselves. Israel cannot afford to luxuriate in these emotions. Madam Prosecutor.
Very good indeed, Your Honor. These must be descendants of the same group that threw stones at him in the Via Dolorosa.
Colonel Dorr, you have told us the quarry work was useless.
We knew that. They knew that. But headquarters didn't. You see, in order to stay out of combat, we had to establish Mauthausen. In order to establish Mauthausen, we had to invent some kind of work which, on the books, would look useful to the war effort. I came up with the rock idea.
Why didn't you simply kill the prisoners, since that was your ultimate goal?
You don't seem to understand the military mind. We had to kill them in a work process, according to orders. So we had to invent the work process. Believe me, it was tedious.
Our investigations indicate that you developed a way of relieving the tedium. What was that?
Well, it was childish, and I'm a little ashamed of it. We had a pool going. We numbered each day's batch, and the officer who came up with the largest number of survivors would win a bottle of schnapps. We stopped it. We stopped it when we found out that some of the officers were putting lighter loads on their numbers so they would survive and win that bottle of schnapps.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Mrs. Levy. I call Joachim Berger. Mr. Berger, what was your occupation in October of 1943?
I was a cinematographer with the rank of captain, attached to the Ministry of Information under Joseph Goebbels.
Where were you on October 11th of that year?
The village of Talnia, occupied Poland.
What were you doing there?
I had been ordered to photograph a punitive operation conducted by the counterinsurgency section of the SS in the ghetto of Talnia.
Will you describe for the court what you photographed?
Our opening sequence was staged before dawn. I remember we had to use 5-kilowatt arcs to light the streets.
Yes.
Colonel Dorff's black shirts rolled up in open trucks. They ran into the houses, ran up the stairs, and threw all the male Jews they found out of the windows.
How old were these Jews?
Under 13 and over 60. The others were, of course, already in the camps working.
Tell the court how you became certain of the age of the victims.
We had to move in for close-ups. They held back throwing some of them out of the windows so that we could change our setups.
And then, Mr. Berger?
Those that could walk were made to stand against the wall. The others were tied in place, some 50 or 60 altogether. Then, as we moved the camera along the wall behind the guns, they went off in succession.
What happened?
Well, a 9.2 millimeter shell is very powerful to use at close range. The people exploded.
They disintegrated.
Yes.
Into pieces. Severed arms and legs.
Yes.
Then what happened?
Now comes the third act.
Tell us, Mr. Berger.
The corpses, the few that were intact, and the pieces of the others were trucked back to the ghetto. They were dumped in a pile, I'd say at least reaching the second story of the houses. By this time, it was full daylight. Colonel Dorff's troops were holding back the mothers and daughters of these people with bayonets. Then, at a signal, they were all allowed to rush to the pile to try to find their sons and fathers, or to try to assemble what they found.
Describe what happened.
An old lady would find an arm with a familiar ring on it. That would dislodge other parts of bodies, and they would all come tumbling down. Sometimes a woman would discover the head of a son or a father. When that happened, Colonel Dorff would make us shoot extreme close-ups with handheld Arriflexes.
Thank you, Mr. Berger.
What was done with the film, Colonel?
We made a title which bloomed out of these last close-ups. It said in Polish, "Obey the German occupation or this will happen in your town." We played it first run in every theater in Poland.
So these executions were staged deliberately for the cameras.
Well, you see, Joseph needed a propaganda film to make himself look useful and to keep his office in business. And I needed a counterinsurgency operation for the same reason.
Clarify, please.
Well, there wasn't any insurgency, but if you have a counterinsurgency, you stay in business because everyone assumes the insurgency. That keeps you looting and raping behind the lines in style while the rest of the army is dying at the front. I understand the Americans developed it to a fine point in Vietnam. The My Lai massacre was a classic.
Irrelevant, Colonel.
I doubt it, but I subside. In any case, Mimi, the whole operation was for Joseph and me a happy coincidence.
Your Honor, in the interest of justice, we scoured the world of Colonel Dorff's contemporaries to find even one person who would defend him, who would speak well of him. We found one. I call Charles Cohn.
Charlie? Charlie, what the hell are you doing here? You don't want I should hang Charlie, a nice Jewish boy like you?
God forbid.
Got that, Mimi? And he's in my will, inherits the lot. A true Christian spirit, Charlie Cohn. No pun intended.
What is your defense of Colonel Dorff?
Oh, I couldn't defend Colonel Dorff. I mean, all those concentration camps and whatever he did was before I was born. They had to be exaggerated anyway.
Your Honor, the witness is calling me a liar.
I mean, I can't believe things like that could have happened. That people could do such things.
They happened.
Then let's say I don't want to believe it. If I did, I might have to resign from the human race. If you will take a survey of my generation, I think you'll find that that's the prevailing attitude.
There, you're right.
If you do not want to defend Colonel Dorff, then what are you doing here?
Oh, I don't believe he is Colonel Dorff.
We have incontrovertible proof of that in his x-rays, past and present, plus his own admission. Now, why should you think that?
Mimi, we had someone. like this in the camp. Morris something. I owned him. The Svengali Trilby bit, you know. Prisoner 1,000,004 requests permission to defecate. Sometimes I'd give it, sometimes I wouldn't.
Colonel Dorff was a Nazi, correct?
Yes,
Therefore, he could not be a Jew.
he could not.
Then Mr. Goldman cannot be Colonel Dorff.
I am not following you, Mr. Cohn.
Colonel Dorff. Mr. Goldman. The man in the glass booth is a Jew.
You have every right to say that, young man. But how do you know it?
Because of his sense of humor. No Gentile could possibly have Mr. Goldman's particular sense of humor.
Charlie. I'm afraid that is a generality the court cannot entertain.
Well, then there's his mastery of Yiddish. No matter how talented, I don't think that can be faked by a Gentile.
That is one generality supporting another.
Well, there's one other thing I don't like to say, but no Gentile could ever be as anti-Semitic as Mr. Goldman is.
That is all you have to say, Mr. Cohn?
Yes, ma'am.
You are free to go, Mr. Cohn. Thank you.
I just wanted to help Mr. Goldman.
It was a good try, Charlie. And I appreciate your loyalty. I see you are wearing the Vicuna jacket, huh?
Yeah, but you gave me. You told my cousin Rudin to make it for me.
So I did. Where did he send the bill?
To you, Mr. Goldman.
Ah, you see? You came here to help, but you still remember the jacket. Spent a lot of time on your shoulders. Never lost your head.
What has this got to do with anything, Colonel?
Kept your sense of proportions. I'm proud of you, Charlie boy.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman,
Kiss Mama for me! That woman ought to go on a diet.
Your Honor, the question has in fact never been put to Colonel Dorff. For the record, may I?
Proceed.
Are you Jewish, Colonel?
Am I Jewish? Am I Jewish? I tell you this. My father was pure Junker. 103 now. Still doing great. One of the oldest guys in Germany. Cousin of Hindenburg's. The Führer never forgot that. In some ways, he was a snob, you know. Am I Jewish? My dear madam, it was I.G. Farben who discovered the site. Very suitable for synthetic coal, oil, and rubber. I entered the place laughing. My first mission of that kind. They handed over their valuables and outer clothing. I put them in the anti-tank ditch. I laid them down flat. I shot them through the nape of their neck, gaining confidence at every pull. Sent in my report, very honest report, never slept better in my life. 1 month later, in the pink, the prime of my life, I came to a pit near Dubno, Poland. Getting quite cold around there. I saw 1,000 pairs of shoes and 500 pairs of panties. Nobody was complaining. Sheep. One old grandmother, bold as a coot, should have worn a wig, picks up a baby. The baby laughs, the father laughs, the mother laughs. They all look up at the sky, including the baby. They couldn't believe it was happening, you follow? So I walk over to the mount, I get to the grave, wedge them in, I say, laughing. Am I Jewish? We light the cigarettes, and we start the shooting. We fill up the bottom. They lay in obligingly from the top. The blood runs down from their heads. They lay in cooperatively from the side. We pack them more, and underneath there's a movement, waving arms and such like. Naked, they go down the steps. They climb on the heads of the people below, and I tell them exactly where. Am I Jewish? They lay on top of their dead and dying, and we shot, shot, shot. I never missed one. And in the end, the last lot was so high on a pyre that we had to hold them with one hand and shoot with the other. Just a day in my life. Just one clear day to enjoy. Am I Jewish?
I call Samuel Weinberg. Do you recognize the defendant, Mr. Weinberg?
Could I forget him? I dreamed about him every night. Dreamed of killing him in 100 ways.
I remember you, Sam. And I most respectfully question it. None of them dreamed of any revenge. They couldn't imagine it.
I may not have dreamed of revenge in the camp, but I am making up for it now.
I'm glad you corroborate me, Sam. The system is important to remember. The black people get tough in the good old United States.
Irrelevant, Colonel. Mr. Weinberg, take the stand.
Nevertheless, for historical purposes, I'll give you the recipe. You take away decisions, you take away the future. You make them feel a meaningless mass. I do not mean individuals in a mass. I mean a meaningless mass. Nobody has a watch, you understand? Whatever's left in them that isn't impotent, they turn against themselves, just so they can hold on to it. Sometimes, Your Honor, they'd even get happy with it. There would be a kind of orgy. They would be so happy to feel a tiny trickle of energy to be alive that they didn't care if we killed them. It's a great system. Put them down, 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 as long as you can, as much as you can, and you will rule the world.
Was that the system, Mr. Weinberg?
Yes, it was a ritual of depersonalization, dehumanization, designed to keep us passive, make no trouble for them.
Please tell us of the day you first saw Colonel Dorff.
We came off the cattle cars. It had been 14 hours from Frankfurt, and we were packed in so we could only stand upright. Some old people died standing up. A woman fell asleep and dropped her baby, and it died on the floor.
Colonel Dorff was on the train?
Certainly not. I was waiting for them at the camp.
What did he do there?
He lined us all up on the gravel. Then he singled out 4 of the Orthodox, 2 men and 2 women. And he shot each of them in the head in front of us.
Do you confirm that, Colonel?
Of course, of course.
What took place next, Mr. Weinberg?
He had 4 more Orthodox step forward. He held his gun on them and forced them to urinate on the bodies.
Did they?
All but one. He died.
He was shot?
No, he just died. I guess he couldn't do it.
Come on, don't make a hero out of him. He probably just relieved himself and couldn't piss.
I have a question, Mr. Weinberg. Mrs. Rosen.
Yes, Your Honor.
It is suggested by Colonel Dorff's comments about heroism, and it's a question which has always troubled the witnesses to the Holocaust.
Ask it, Your Honor.
There were hundreds of you assembled in the freight yards of Frankfurt.
Yes,
How many guards were there? About.
perhaps 20.
What year was this?
1944.
So your Jewish neighbors had been disappearing by the thousands for 5 years. If you so outnumbered the guards, why didn't you rush at them and tear their hearts out?
Some of us would have been killed, maybe all of us.
Are you saying you didn't know what had happened to all those thousands of people?
Some of us suspect it. Even so, you don't do anything. Maybe it won't happen to you.
Suppose you knew, you actually knew.
That would be different. But they made sure we didn't. Our fate was beyond our imagination. Some people all over the world don't believe it 30 years later.
Your Honor, we know now. They swear they will push us into the sea. We have learned by experience. We are prepared to rush at them now. This time if we go, we won't go alone.
You are out of order, Mrs. Rosen.
Yes, Your Honor. You may step down.
Goddamn Mimi, you're a pistol. Another time, another place, I could have been your husband.
You're out of order, Colonel.
You're quite right. What I meant was, what I was trying to say in my crude way was, there were no heroes. Maybe a few. Those we got in the first 5 minutes. And if there was any heroism left, it was gone after, in front of each other, we made them screw their wives and everyone else's wives and their children and everyone else's children. They were too disgraced to be heroes.
Are you finished, Colonel?
I was just warming up. You questioned, Your Honor, and it's ancillary questions. How did it happen? How was it possible? I will tell you. It happened out of love. Do not make the mistake of thinking it happened out of hate. It happened out of love. The most dangerous virtue of all. I promise you, love. People of Israel, let me speak to you of our Führer. Let me speak to you of our Führer with love. He who answered our German need. He who rescued us from our most terrible fears. He who made us believe in ourselves. His family background was commonplace, his education negligible, his appearance undistinguished. To whom did he appeal? To the people. When he spoke, at first, he was shy, he would hesitate, he would stammer, his body stiff, his voice hushed. But then the words came stronger, came steadier, came louder. His body grew free. He would bang out his right arm like a hammer. Louder and louder he spoke, a torrent, a waterfall. The climaxes were shouted and shouted out and up and beyond. Und die göttliche Vorsehung wird uns bis zum Endsieg treiben und wir werden bis zum letzten Blutstropfen, bis zum letzten Mann kämpfen. The end was absolute. Silence. Utter silence. A great wide sweep of the right arm. And so to the tremendous cry, the vast, overwhelming cry, the call of love from the people, Deutschland, erwache, Heil Hitler, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil! Why? Why did we love him? Because we were afraid. And we knew he was afraid. We did not know what he feared. But he did, and he told us. And because we loved him, we believed him. Jew. Ja, die Juden! They hovered over the fatherland like vultures. He told us. It was marvelous to know, finally, what frightened us. To have it all go away so easily. And therefore to end his fear and our fear, we had to destroy them. That was the need he satisfied in us. That is why he became our good and wise father. That is why we loved him. The killers of the world at our throats, we loved him. With the hordes from the east and the west, the capitalists, the communists, we loved him. Starving, we loved him. With his head wobbling, his left arm slack, his hands trembling, we loved him. His generals lost in the war. His subordinates were unworthy. There was only him. There was no successor. Hess was mad. Goering reviled. Himmler rejected. He was loved. Great king, brave king,
Wait yet a little while, and the days of your suffering will be over. Already the sun of your good fortune stands behind the clouds, and soon, O beloved Führer, soon the sun will rise upon you. He never deserted us. All but he. He only loved to the end. While he lived, Germany lived. And the people demanded it. We never denied him. People of Israel, we never denied him. And those who tell you differently lie in their hearts. And if he were able to rise from the dead, he would prove it to you now, all over again. If only we had someone to rise to, someone to throw out our arms to, love, to stamp our feet for, someone, this marvelous Father, to tell us what we are afraid of, and to tell us how to get rid of our fears forever, for any time, anywhere, any place. That is whom we will love. That is for whom we will kill. And in killing, we would live and be cleansed of fear. Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles in der Welt. Well, Your Honor, it was 1,000 years ago.
There must have been Germans who didn't agree with you, who hated Hitler. Why didn't they speak up? Proceed, please.
Your Honor, we have persuaded these two witnesses to come here to publicly corroborate the identity of Colonel Dorf. They were his physicians.
Proceed.
I call Dr. Schmidt. What is your profession, Dr. Schmidt?
I am a dental surgeon practicing in Munich.
Was Karl Adolf Dorf your patient?
Yeah, but I had no idea he was a war criminal.
Of course, naturally. Is that Dorf?
Yeah, that is Dorf.
You are certain?
Absolutely certain.
Did you make x-rays of Colonel Dorf's mouth in 1943?
Yeah, I did.
Are these those x-rays?
Yeah, these are those x-rays. You see, here on the side, you can see the name.
Thank you. These are x-rays made of the defendant's mouth here in Jerusalem last week. Will you tell us how they compare?
They are plates of the same mouth and teeth. The dental work is absolutely identical.
Thank you. You may step down. I call Dr. Alvarez of Buenos Aires. What is your medical specialization, Dr. Alvarez?
I am an orthopedic surgeon.
Did you perform surgery on Karl Adolf Dorf in 1946 in Buenos Aires?
Yes.
These x-rays were made here last week. Please compare them to these, which came from your office.
They are identical.
Do you recognize the defendant?
It was a long time ago.
Are both these sets of plates x-rays of the defendant?
Yes.
And that is the defendant?
Yes.
Then is it reasonable to assume that in spite of the passage of years, you can recognize him as Colonel Dorf? Dr. Alvarez, does the defendant resemble Karl Adolf Dorf to you?
Yes, but...
But what?
I am a Jew.
That is irrelevant, Doctor.
No, I have to tell you.
Why is it important for us to know that?
Because that is not Dorf.
If that is not Dorf, then how is it that the X-rays made last week are duplicates of the X-rays of Dorf you gave our agents from your file?
I am sorry, but those were not Dorf's X-rays.
And how did they get in your file?
A man gave them to me.
What man?
I didn't know him.
What have you done with Dorf's X-rays? The real ones?
I destroyed them.
And replaced them with these? Why?
The man gave me 10,000 American dollars.
You are dismissed, Dr. Alvarez.
I am sorry. I am very sorry. I could not let it happen.
Dr. Schmidt, will you return to the stand, please?
Nein, I do not wish.
I insist.
I am a voluntary witness.
You are in Israel and subject to the laws of Israel, specifically those concerned with perjury. There will be no prosecution if you now tell the truth. Is that Karl Adolf Dorf? Speak up.
No!
What were you paid to replace Dorf's X-rays with those of the defendant?
40,000 Deutschmark.
That will be all, Dr. Schmidt. Your Honor, all these X-rays, ours made here, and these substituted in Munich and Buenos Aires for those of Colonel Dorf, are positive identification only of Arthur Goldman.
Why did you do it, Mr. Goldman? Why? Why? Why did you assume the identity of Colonel Dorf? Why do you want to degrade yourself? Why do you want to take all this guilt upon yourself? Why, Mr. Goldman? Why? Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman.
Your Honor, the patient, the defendant is unable to respond. He is ill.
I'm afraid so.
It's more than that, Your Honor. He's becoming catatonic.
Remove the defendant from the booth. Gently. No, no, let him be. Mr. Goldman, please, open the door, please. Open the door. We want to help you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman, please, please. Please, Mr. Goldman. Shema Yisrael, Adonai, 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 Echad.